Welcome to the Daily Insider here on VegasInsider.com. I am Kevin Rogers along with Thom Cunningham, and it is Monday, April 12th, so we have a lot to review as far as the Masters this past weekend. Hideki Matsuyama wins the Masters, and also we have NBA, Major League Baseball to get to. So before we get to all that, we want to remind you to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel here at Vegas Insider, and you can join our community here. It's really a cool thing that later on we'll explain more during the live stream and during the Daily Insider, that we're going to start giving away handicapper pick packs, weekly ones, and with your help you can win them. And it's very simple, that all you have to do is put up a best bet for the night in either Major League Baseball or the NBA.
Anything.
Yeah, anything pretty much. And the way you do it is you go to our live chat on YouTube. You put in your name. Also, the two requirements you have, these are two requirements that are both free, so it's simple. You need to have a user ID on VegasInsider.com, and also you need to be a subscriber to our YouTube channel.
Right.
Easy things to do.
Yep.
And if you are if you already have an ID on VegasInsider.com, you're set. If you don't, it's very easy. The big yellow button that says register, you see this right up here, the register button. Click on that, and it's free, so you don't have to worry about paying anything, no credit card, none of that. You just register your name, your email, and a user ID, and then at least you're going to be in the system, so when we're ready to give you those picks, assuming you're a winner, you're all set. So that's what it is. We're not just going to send them to you through a pigeon. So that's the way it is. So go up to the big yellow button, the register button, and make sure you're registered to be a user on VegasInsider.com and also a subscriber on our YouTube channel, and that will get you to the free picks of any handicapper of your choosing. But we're going to choose the winner, or we're going to have the winner tomorrow. We have to wait and see the results today.
Yep.
So that's how it goes, and we'll remind you again towards the end of the Daily Insider how it works. So with all that being said, Tom, let's begin with the Masters. And first off, I will give you credit on this one.
Ooh,
so you better take this right now, because I don't know how much more I'll give you credit. But Will Zalatoris, you mentioned him on Friday.
Yep.
And, of course, he's the guy, the blonde, who looked like he was Happy Gilmore's first caddy before he went to the homeless guy. But he played very well. He hung around. He didn't win. Hideki Matsuyama ended up winning. But you hit Zalatoris as far as him being in the running, in the mix, and he was there for a while. But Matsuyama just had too big of a lead going into Sunday.
Yeah, went 3-on-3 with the best bets. But going to Will Zalatoris, I was hesitant to take him as the top debutant at plus 110. He knocked those odds out of the park, finishing 9 under in second place at the Masters. He didn't win, but he arrived. And Will Zalatoris, if he, he didn't get the green jacket, but he definitely made a name for himself in this tournament. He is now going to be looked at. I mean, we're going through major odds for the PGA Championship, the U.S. Open, and the British Open this year, and Will Zalatoris' odds have all gone up as a result of what he's done in Augusta this year. So great golf from Zalatoris. Won the top debutant market. Went 3 for 3 overall, though. Got Abraham Answer. He finished in the top 30. And I don't know if you know this or not, Kevin, but he actually had a 2-stroke penalty after Thursday's round 1. Yeah. And so he actually would have hit top Oklahoma State player as well. Unfortunately, Victor Hovland took that, and it was a miss for me. But I feel good knowing that if Abraham Answer didn't get a 2-stroke penalty, he would have covered another market as well. Then we also got Bubba Watson, top 30, correct. But the big one at plus 250 was that the Masters was won by a stroke. The winning margin was 1 stroke exactly. And I don't know if you saw Hideki Matsuyama, how he ended the Masters, but he actually bogeyed on the last hole off of a pretty simple putt to hit for par, and he missed it, thankfully, and he bogeyed, and that was able to hit the 1-stroke margin. So overall, it was a successful betting weekend for the Masters. I think the story, obviously, outside of Hideki Matsuyama being the first Japanese golfer to win the green jacket. I do think, Kevin, it was Will Zalatoris. The man has arrived on the PGA Tour.
Yeah, Matsuyama performed very well, and obviously one of the big stories from the weekend about the golfers who didn't make it.
And yeah, a lot of them.
When you look at Bryson DeChambeau, who's always had problems at Augusta, he didn't make the cut. Dustin Johnson didn't make the cut. McIlroy, all these guys struggled, so you didn't have those big names. We talked about it late in the week last week, Tom, about going into Thursday, the opening round, and going into Friday, that, you know, these big names who people want to ride, they didn't even get through Friday. So now you're having a bunch of other guys you got to try to find in the middle, and who's going to be those middle guys. And it always goes back to, it's so hard to pick a winner. You know, you have 100-something golfers.
Needle in a haystack.
Exactly. You get one, and Matsuyama is a guy who's been around, and he wins the Masters.
Yeah.
So, yeah, again, you could have that guy, like a Zalatoris or some of these other players that finish 4th or 5th that did really well,
right?
But they have nothing to show for it unless you took them top 5 or top 10. But to win it all, they have nothing to show for it.
What's interesting is, well, first of all, DeChambeau, what happened was he made the cut, but it's only because his second round was insanely good, and then he went right back down to earth. But you saw 7 of the top 20 golfers in the world miss the cut for Augusta. And so you really didn't have any huge names. You had John Rahm, who was kind of lingering around, but it was mainly at the top. You had Will Zalatoris. Now, Xander Schauffele, I want to talk about real quick because he had odds to finish in the top 10 at plus 225 entering round 1. I think we all saw how good Xander Schauffele played, and then he triple bogeyed. He had a chance to actually win the Masters and catch Hideki Matsuyama, and he would have, but he triple bogeyed late in the round. And so you're talking about a guy, Schauffele, who has now seen a top 10 finish in 8 of his last 15 major appearances. I'm interested to see what he's going to do in the next major coming up and what his odds are going to be, because it does seem like bookmakers are now starting to sniff out Xander Schauffele and how good he is, the bigger the event. In terms of top names, though, there weren't many. Now, I don't know to the typical sports fan, if Xander Schauffele is a household name for someone who doesn't follow golf. But you did have a lot of those middle name guys as opposed to the household names like you mentioned, like Rory and Dustin Johnson and things of that. We also didn't have Tiger Woods in this Masters event because of the obvious accident he had. So honestly, overall, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a great Masters event. I don't think we needed the big names. And it was good to see Jordan Spieth do well as well. He finished 3rd place. So, overall, a good, successful Masters. Keep your eye on Xander Schauffele and what his odds are moving forward with other major events.
Yeah, and Jordan Spieth, who won the Masters in 2015,
yeah.
he hung around for a little bit.
Yeah,
and,
did well.
Again, you can still play well and not win it all. Unfortunately,
right.
One person's going to win, and Matsuyama. He ends up becoming the first Japanese player to win at the Masters, which is a good story. So now we move on to the NBA, and at least we're going to go back at least to Saturday for a moment.
Okay.
And the big story Saturday was the Lakers blowing out the Nets 126-101 at Barclays Center. And still LeBron's out for a while with the Lakers. Anthony Davis is out. And they're I'm going to say finding ways to win, but they're putting it together. Kyle Kuzma is still banged up, and yet Andre Drummond in the lineup for the Lakers. They got him on the cheap, and he played well. It's a big guy that they could throw in the middle. And the Nets now 1-6 against the spread as a double-digit favorite this season. And the Nets beat the Lakers at Staples Center earlier this season. No James Harden Saturday night, but the Lakers pretty much in control the whole time, getting 11.5. You never had to sweat it out.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see Brooklyn is not a double-digit favorite against Minnesota tonight, and we'll get to that game, obviously, but I wonder if the lingering effects of this Laker loss has anything to do with those that spread being somewhat short. I know 6...
And Kyrie's out tonight, too.
Yeah, and I know 6.5 isn't really short for basketball, but, considering the state of the Timberwolves and the state of the Nets, I think it's fair to say those are pretty short spread right there.
And also, look at some of these games, Tom, from Saturday. Utah, Philadelphia, Phoenix, Golden State, Portland, all these substantial favorites, all winning in blowout fashion. Yeah. And the Utah game, too, that was a 2-point game with 4 minutes to go.
Right.
And the Jazz went on a huge run to cover, but, obviously OKC is not a very good team. But anything stick out there? I mean, Phoenix beat Washington in a revenge spot. But yeah, some of those big favorites came through.
No, you hit the nail on the head, I think, with the Utah game and the run that they went on to end that game. You're thinking, okay, Sacramento has this. There's no way they lose by double digits. And then, boom, Utah hits you. I think it's just a good reminder that live betting NBA is insanely difficult because of the amount of runs that the league sees in each game. And that Utah game was full proof of it. I saw the tweet you sent out about that. About the Utah run that they went on at the end of the game. And it's just a friendly reminder that in the NBA, it's really never over until it hits zero when you're talking about the spread because of these insane runs that teams can go on. It literally can take a minute and a half for a 12-point swing now in the NBA, especially with all these teams. The evolution of the NBA has now gone to shoot the three. It's almost parallel to MLB's hit for the fences. Live and die by that. So I think that's kind of why you're seeing more substantial runs this year in the NBA than you have in the past because everyone's just shooting threes at this point.
Well, and looking back at last night, and you bring this up, and I'm going to skip around a little bit, but this Dallas-San Antonio game, and the Spurs had been struggling. I noticed this, Tom, that Dallas was up 7 early in the third, about a minute in, not even. San Antonio went up 7 about 6 minutes later. Then a few minutes later, Dallas had tied the game. You're like, gee, like you're going back. It's just insane. And San Antonio ended up winning that game 119-117. It's the first time the Spurs beat the Mavs in 3 meetings. And Dallas was coming off that Milwaukee win. The Spurs have been struggling. But just to make that point that these swings, and if you follow the NBA, you know how crazy it is that you can have an early lead and it means nothing. But, yeah, I mean, these things happen that fast.
Yeah, and, I mean, one thing I don't think we also consider is the minute restrictions for players as the playoffs near. And I think what you're starting to see more and more are teams who are comfortable with their identity starting to sit players more and more, their superstars more and more, and maybe they don't sit them for the game like they're out of the lineup completely, but they are on a minutes restriction. And I think that's something you need to eye, especially for superstars who are now returning. We're getting to the end of the year in the NBA where you're seeing where a lot of these players who did take time off. I think LeBron's probably the most notable who will be returning in a few weeks. I'm eager to see his minute restriction when he returns. I don't expect him to play full, 30-plus minutes when he returns unless he returns in the playoffs. So just bear that in mind too. Look at lineups right now in this time of year because it becomes very crucial in terms of you have coaches maybe sitting players for rest or maybe just on a minutes restriction. So I think you need to consider that when you're betting these games near the end of the season in the NBA. And you see it very commonly with other sports too. NFL is probably most popular with players sitting and whatnot. But not always do the NBA odds reflect what coaches are thinking and what they're doing with their top players in terms of minutes. Usually with the NFL, the odds makers will be able to, okay, Kansas City's sitting Patrick Mahomes in the last week. Obviously, Kansas City's not a favorite. It's different with the NBA, so just be mindful of that and make sure you're checking the lineups right now in this time of the year because you do have managers and coaches who are switching things up, trying to accumulate minute restrictions and minute times and things like that. They're really preparing for the postseason, so just bear that in mind when you're betting on NBA games moving forward.
In some of the other games yesterday in the NBA, Tom, Trae Young was out for the Hawks,
right.
And that line flipped. Atlanta was laying 1.5, and Charlotte closed a 2.5-point favorite, and that was a close game. The Hawks were up big. Hornets came back. They were in control, but then the Hawks pulled away there to win by 4. So big game there in the Southeast.
Look at that fourth quarter for Denver.
Well, Boston, I think, had a 31-3 run at some point in the second half, but for the Denver Nuggets to be up 11 at the end of 1 and to score 8 points in the fourth quarter against the Celtics team, who really isn't great on the road, is kind of crazy. And Boston now pulls off the sweep of Denver, so that's a good start to their road trip. And the Celtics, who I don't know if they got momentum from that comeback win against Minnesota Friday, but they were down that whole game to Minnesota. Jason Tatum blew up at 53 points. But the Celtics, that was a win they desperately needed because they have just not – they've been so up and down this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think some encouragement obviously is 8 points allowed in the fourth quarter. But look through that box score. Not one quarter did Boston give up 30 points. And I think the Celtics defense has been their staple when Brad Stevens has been there this whole time. And you're starting to see maybe Boston's defense get back to what it was. I'm I don't think they need to ask Robert Williams to be a big man. They need him to play well on defense. And then I think the rest of the pieces will fall into place with Boston. The encouraging sign, though, is that when you look at that box score, not one quarter did Boston allow 30 or more points against a very high potent offense in Denver on the road too. So some encouraging signs for those Celtics fans.
Milwaukee had struggled, and Giannis is still banged up, but they go to Orlando. I mean, they just outclass Orlando.
Oh, yeah.
They had a couple guys come back last night. Chris Middleton came back among them, and they were up 13 at the end of one, up 19 at the half, and kind of cruised against the Magic there. New Orleans, they pull away to beat Cleveland, and Cleveland's starting backcourt was out, and the Pelicans looked out. I mean, that was 116-109, and that was, I think, a 2 or 3 point game in the final minute. Zion broke away for a dunk, and then Brandon Ingram made a few free throws, so they ended up winning that game by 7. The Raptors, this is another spot, Tom. No rest, and they're down to 1-10 or 1-11 this season with no rest. It is amazing how bad this Toronto team, and they played really well against Cleveland the night before on the road. That line swung in Cleveland's favor, and the Raptors had a huge first quarter, and they rolled past the Cavs. That was a revenge spot for Toronto. But now they get the Knicks, and look at that, down 11 after 1, down 14 after 2. And, I mean, they came back, made it interesting in the third, but still the Raptors have been poisoned with no rest this season.
Yeah, New York has been good at home against teams with losing records. And so I think there is – it's so funny how a year will change the perception of some teams. The conviction now lies in New York more than it does Toronto. And that's something I don't think anyone would have said for the past decade. And so – New York at home. I think they're at home tonight, too, against a team with a losing record. Oh, okay.
No, they got the Lakers.
Yeah, so just bear that in mind. New York at home, when they're favorite, they should win. And not only that, they should cover the spread as they have done so a couple times, including this Raptors game. But we'll get to the Knicks game in a second for tonight.
Chicago loses at Minnesota, and the Timberwolves, who have played a little better of late, they're more competitive. They're scoring a lot of points. I mean, we look at what Minnesota's done. I just want to point this out for a moment. And Minnesota gets Brooklyn tonight, so they can drop a ton on them.
Right.
But Minnesota, and granted, this is an overtime game against Boston, but
look at that,
137, 136, 121. So maybe look at Timberwolves team total over against this horrible Brooklyn defense.
Well, you're also starting to see Karl Anthony Towns get back to his dominant form. The guy's starting to get 30 or more points a game. I mean, I remember when he came into the league, he was scoring well over 30. I mean, this guy had 50 points and like 15 rebounds in one game. So he's getting back into form. Anthony Edwards has been playing very well. He's been scoring 20-plus points per game. He is also now the front runner for Rookie of the Year. I mean, obviously LaMelo Ball getting hurt had a lot to do with that, but Anthony Edwards has been productive, and seeing him at the top of the Rookie of the Odds list, I think there is some conviction in Minnesota being able to score points just between Towns and Edwards. But you also have, Malik Beasley or Darius Bazley? They're hurt, so he's hurt, so they could be scoring more points, honestly. But I do think that with Edwards, with Towns, there is something Minnesota can start to build there, and you're starting to see the early potential of those two just based off the amount of points they're able to score.
And also Minnesota, when you look at their team log, they don't win back-to-back games. Last time they won back-to-back games was the beginning of the season against Detroit and Utah. So the Timberwolves, whenever they win a game,
they don't win the next.
They lose by 4, lost by 12, lost by 22, lost by 11, lost by 16. So that's kind of curious where maybe you just stick to how many points they'll score tonight.
Right.
Because it's going to be tough against Brooklyn, even though they're a little banged up right now. The Pacers end up beating the Grizzlies 132-125. They scored 45 in the first quarter.
Yeah.
Memphis still kind of hung around towards the end of this game, and then Indiana pulled away and won by 7. And there was a play Ja Morant went in, and I don't know if he tripped or he lost his balance, and there was a steal and went the other way for a dunk. But the Pacers, though, they sweep the Grizzlies. So Memphis, after losing to the Knicks in overtime, now they fall to the Pacers. And Indiana, who, again, they've been really disappointing at times this year when they're healthy, because they had Sabonis in, they had Malcolm Brogdon in, they have Karis LeVert, who they got in the James Harden mega deal, who's a very good scorer. They just don't have Miles Turner now, and obviously T.J. Warren's been out the whole season. But it's like if you get all these guys together, not the Pacers can be any kind of threat, but at least they're a viable team in the East. It's just hard when you have all these injuries.
Yeah, now Memphis, now they have to play Chicago. Very similar team, same division actually as the Pacers. So it'll be interesting to see what Grind City can do tonight. But the Bulls are no easy task, and so Memphis, at home losing to Indiana. Now you get Chicago at home. This is a pretty big rebound game for Memphis, especially if they want to, let everyone in the league know we're for real in the West. I don't think they're for real personally, but in terms of being a competitive playoff team, they want to send that message that they're not pretenders, they are contenders. As a matter of fact, Taylor Jenkins is near the top of the list for Coach of the Year odds, just to kind of show you what he's been doing with Memphis and the success they've had this season. But this is a statement game tonight. Memphis at home against the Bulls after losing to the Pacers. A lot bigger game than it might be advertised on paper to be.
Yeah, the two late games last night, before we move on to tonight, the Heat beat the Blazers. That was a revenge spot for the Heat. First game of their long road trip, and they win by 9. You see, up big going into the fourth quarter,
Yep.
and Portland, made it a little more interesting, but still the Heat win that one. No Kawhi for the Clippers. They don't cover against the Pistons, but you see that fourth quarter, Pistons winning over the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Detroit, they have been competitive, and that's
Yep.
the one thing you can give them is that at least, they've hung in a lot of these games. It's easy for them to really pack it in, but they haven't.
Well, it's interesting because entering that game between Detroit and the Clippers, the underdog had covered the spread in 5 of 6. So that trend does continue with the Pistons covering.
So now let's look at tonight, and Lakers-Knicks from the Garden. Still the Lakers dinged up, and the Knicks playing with no rest, and Lakers off that win over the Nets, so obviously they're right in the area.
Yeah.
They're now moving to New York City to play the Knicks tonight, and this is the first meeting. They haven't played yet this season. They played early on last season, so it's been a while for these two teams. But again, you're getting the Knicks with no rest here, and the Lakers, who have covered a few in a row against the Heat, against the Nets, but now you're a much shorter underdog here. You're not getting all these points, and
Right.
New York now, we talk about this so many times, Tom, that the Knicks have got to close these games out. They did that against Memphis the other night. All right, they did it against Memphis. They pulled away from Toronto. It's like now, those middle-tier teams, I know Toronto's down this year, but now you're getting the Lakers. In spite of no LeBron and Anthony Davis, they're still a very good defensive team. You see that low total of 206.
Yeah.
That if you're the Knicks, this is a game you cannot afford to lose.
Yeah, and odds makers are showing a lot of respect to the Lakers here, even without their studs, because -2 is short for what New York has done. New York has covered in 5 straight games. And then, as mentioned earlier, they win a lot of home games as the favorite. They've actually won 10 straight home games when playing as the favorite. And so with the -2, I think odds makers, they know what New York is at home, but they also know what the Lakers are and what they have been doing recently without their stars. So I think that's why you see the -2, the short spread. If you're asking me to pick a winner here, I'm going to take New York at home with the short spread. And some stats here. Julius Randle has scored 26 points or more in 3 straight games when New York is the favorite. So I do expect Julius Randle to take over in this game and try to lead his Knicks to a win.
The Spurs and the Magic, that is they're meeting for the second time this season. San Antonio destroyed Orlando at home last month, and San Antonio was down double digits at the end of the first quarter. They had a huge second and a huge fourth. The Magic scored 10 and 13 in those 2 quarters. But San Antonio off that win over Dallas last night. Now they are playing with no rest. And Orlando, what's interesting about them, Tom, is that after all the trades they've made, they've still been pretty competitive against the spread. And just to look at this really fast with the Magic on their team page, that going back to March 24th against Phoenix, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-1, 6-1, 6-2, 7-2, 7-3.
Yeah.
And you know what? Even off the ATS losses, beat Phoenix by 1. They were up big on Denver, still covered the 17. That's a huge number. And they had a last-second 3 or 3 the last few seconds to cover against Indiana. But after this blowout to Milwaukee, they have done a good job of responding and being competitive the next game.
Well, I do like Orlando at home in the spot as the underdog. I believe they're given 6 to San Antonio, which I'll take. The Spurs, they have actually failed to cover the spread in 4 of 5 games when they are the favorite. So now you are on the road, no rest, against a team that has been competitive. I do think the Magic will cover the spread in this one.
Brooklyn and Minnesota, we talked about that one a little bit ago, and just to reiterate that the Nets actually needed to pull away from Minnesota. Hung with them in their last meeting at Barclays Center. This was about a week or so ago. 112-107. This was a 2-point game in the final minute.
Yep.
And Minnesota was getting 10.5. Now, look, Minnesota has not won back-to-back games since the first 2 games of the season. So that's one thing you have to consider.
Yep.
And secondly, for Brooklyn, we talked about their lack of covering as a double-digit favorite. Let's look back and see what they've done after being a double-digit favorite.
Okay.
Now, recently, this one they covered against Houston, then they played Boston, laying 2.5, won by 12. After not covering against Detroit, they won by 5 against the Knicks, so they didn't cover that one. After this Orlando loss, they didn't cover against Washington. After this Houston game, they were laying 2.5. Harden didn't play in that one, and they won big. So the point is, it's kind of up and down a little bit. Here they're laying 10.5, then lost to Cleveland. So it's a tough one. You can't really trust that trend necessarily to say that, all right, well, now you're getting some value. It's a very tough game because, the public would be on Brooklyn. It's just all Kevin Durant tonight. No Kyrie, no Harden.
Right.
But that ATS run, Tom, I mean, look at that. There's not a lot of wins in there.
Yeah. However, they do cover against Brooklyn. As you mentioned a week ago, March 29th, they covered against the Nets. Minnesota has covered 6 straight against Brooklyn. And you mentioned the back-to-backs. The trend here is Minnesota has lost 8 of its last 9 games when playing the second game of a back-to-back.
Right.
So it's a bit of a toss-up. I think the conviction does lie in live betting this, as a matter of fact, just to get a feel of where this game is going, because it would not surprise me if Minnesota, at home, covers with Brooklyn missing 2 of their best players. And historically, Minnesota does cover against Brooklyn. Now, I know history might not matter so much because Brooklyn has a completely new lineup. It's a completely new team this year. But no Harden, no Irving. All you have is Durant. I think that if you like Minnesota, feel free to take them. But the trends are a bit too unpredictable for me, where I would feel better live betting just to see the pace of the game and how it's going.
Philadelphia is at Dallas. That's the ESPN game tonight. Philadelphia blew out Dallas earlier this season at home. And now the Mavs, with no rest, off of the loss to the Spurs last night. Now you're getting them as a dog. And they've been a decent home dog this season.
Yeah.
But Philadelphia, I mean, look, 36-17. They are playing very well. They want to win the Atlantic. And they're tied with Brooklyn heading into play tonight, where Dallas still has got a comfortable lead over the Spurs, still up a few games. So
they should be fine.
Yeah, they're all right, even if they lose this one. But also the one thing you wonder, at least early in the day, just because things have been wacky in the NBA,
right,
is keep an eye on Luka, on Porzingis and those guys, because there have been times where Rick Carlisle has pulled the plug on them, and then also, okay, they're going to rest today or tonight. So just watch out for that before you do anything, I think, with this game.
Well, Dallas, they've covered 6 of 8. So they've been doing pretty well in that regard. They are home, where they have beaten Philadelphia 13 of their last 14 times. But I don't think those trends are as flashy as advertised, because you're dealing with Philadelphia, and for all the reasons you just mentioned, Kevin. I don't think it's as clear cut. I actually like Philadelphia in this spot, despite all of the trends and signs pointing towards Dallas winning and covering this game. I just think Philly is the better team. Joel Embiid is back. He is playing. Joel Embiid has also scored 35 points or more in 3 of 4 games when facing a team with a winning record. So he brings it when he needs to. I think Philly gets it done. But if you like Dallas, there's a lot of conviction from some of these trends that favor the Mavericks actually winning this game.
Washington and Utah, the last time these teams played, Tom, the Wizards actually knocked off the Jazz in D.C. This was back on March 18th, a 131-122 win for Washington. That was after they lost in the final seconds to Sacramento the night before, so they're getting 10.5. They beat the Jazz, and this was a long stretch of losing for the Wizards, so they needed to get that win. And Washington, so far on this current road trip that's taken them from Florida, where they split a pair of games with Toronto and Orlando, to now out west, where they beat Golden State a few nights ago and then were blown out by Phoenix Saturday night. Now you get Utah, then you get Sacramento in a revenge spot at the end. But the Jazz, look, there's a runaway train at times, and we talked about them with their with the game against the Kings on Saturday night, in which it was a 2-3-point game, and then Utah ends up pulling away for the win.
Utah at home is kind of a different animal. They've won 24 straight at home, but they've failed to cover the spread in 5 straight games when playing the first game of a back-to-back. I personally think Utah is fine to take in covering the spread. The spread is a bit high, but you saw what they can do with the short amount of time in their last game. So between the two, I would go with Utah. But the fact that they have failed to cover the spread in 5 straight games before entering a back-to-back is a bit interesting, and I'm wondering why that's the case. I would like to know how many of those games were on the road, though. As I just mentioned, Utah has won 24 straight at home. So I do not recommend betting against Utah when they're playing in Salt Lake City, regardless if it's straight up or against the spread. They're just too good. They're just too good. Look at that, 23-2 overall at home. I know the spread is a bit high, but I think you're playing the odds correctly. Even if Utah doesn't cover the spread, you're still playing the smart odds correctly, and that's all you can really ask for entering any game. So I'll take Utah at 11.5 and winning straight up. But there is some worry with the fact that Utah has failed to cover in 5 straight before entering a back-to-back series.
Chicago and Memphis, and we had just discussed this, the Grizzlies off the loss to the Pacers and Chicago off the loss to Minnesota. So now the Bulls get flipped to a road underdog after being favored last night, and Billy Donovan's team playing with no rest.
Yeah.
And looking at some of the games when they have lost or have played with no rest recently for Chicago, lost by 12 at Atlanta, lost by Utah. Here it was, this Utah game. Lost by 25 at home to Utah. Lost by 7 to San Antonio. Lost by 11 to the Heat. So since the All-Star break, the Bulls 0-4 with no rest. And you're on the end of this long road trip. They've just lost the last 2.
Yeah.
So you kind of wonder now, and we had talked about Chicago being a very good road underdog this season, but now in this spot getting just 2.5 points, because the ones that they're covering, getting 11.5, getting 8, getting 7, getting
large
6
spreads.
Now it's a lower one against Memphis, who, I always like to say teams should be motivated, even win or loss, but
they're playing pissed.
But Memphis, after losing the last 2, it's just hard with Chicago, the no rest, to trust them.
Yeah, the short spread makes it a lot more difficult, for sure. But there's a pretty constant trend between these two teams. The road team is covered in 10 of 15, and Chicago would be the road team in this situation. But I think the short spread and Memphis playing pissed off right now, I would actually lean towards the Grizzlies getting the job done here. Some interesting stats. John Morant, you had mentioned him. He has scored 23 points or more in 3 of his last 4 home games. Zach LaVine has scored 27 points or more in 6 straight games when playing the second game of a back-to-back. So although Chicago does seem to struggle a little bit when they do play back-to-back, Zach LaVine still shines. And so if you are a little bit uneasy on who to choose in this, I think Zach LaVine over the point total he has been given for prop betting would be a spectacular take in this game. So wait and see maybe with the lineups, as I mentioned earlier before we even started, to see who will be playing, because you're talking about 2 teams coming up back-to-back, so they're probably going to be resting some players. So just be sure you look at the lineup here, but Chicago tends to do well on the road. This series between Chicago and Memphis, the road team seems to cover more times than not. But I think the conviction for me lies in the territory of Zach LaVine flirting with a 30-point game in this one.
Sacramento is at New Orleans, and the road team has won each of the first 2 meetings with these teams. New Orleans off that win at Cleveland last night, and New Orleans is 3-7 this season with no rest. They're 0-5 their last 5 off back-to-back wins. They just beat Philadelphia a few nights ago as a home dog. And New Orleans, I don't really trust them as a home favorite. I've talked about this a lot.
I wonder why.
Well, look, their last 2 wins as a home favorite, they beat the Lakers and Mavs. That's great. There's only one problem. Porzingis and Luka out for Dallas. AD and LeBron out for the Lakers. So they beat teams like were very shorthanded. And Sacramento, they've had...
They're in a
22 and 31. They've had so many ups and downs this year. They had a nice winning streak, and then they've lost, I think, 6 straight. But they've lost to Detroit, as a favorite. They lost to the Lakers as a favorite. They lost to Minnesota as a favorite, too. So they're getting a few points against a New Orleans team that is playing with no rest. And I feel like this line is a little short. I really think that the Kings could be worth a look tonight.
Yeah, the only thing that would worry me is that New Orleans, they actually play well against the West. They've covered the spread in, I think, 5 of 6 against the West. You hit the nail on the head with Sacramento. I actually was thinking about this before we came on this morning. Sacramento might be the streakiest team in the NBA. Yeah. When it rains, it pours with them, whether it's for good or bad. If they're losing, they're going to lose a bunch in a row. If they're winning, they're going to win a bunch in a row. And it seems right now that they are at a point where you might want to avoid them until they get back into their winning momentum, because it will come before the season ends. They'll start to get on a little bit of momentum and win a few games. But with Sacramento, it's been the same story with them all season long. They're streaky. Right now, they're in a funk, so I wouldn't advise taking them. There is a trend for New Orleans covering a very short spread at home. So I would lean Pelicans in this one. However, I think it's so, because when you look at a trend, right, and you see that Sacramento has lost 6 straight games, you could look at that trend, Kevin, and say, okay, they're going to lose 7. I could look at that same trend and say they're due to win. So it's all about your own perception about this game and how these trends translate in your own mind. With that said, I'm taking the Pelicans. I like the trend that has been given, and I do think Sacramento continues to stumble. However, De'Aaron Fox has been absolutely electric this whole season. He has scored 30 points or more in 3 straight games when facing New Orleans. So, again, if it's too short of a spread, if this is too close on paper for you to take, look at the prop markets, see what they're offering for De'Aaron Fox. The man should be able to score 30 points in this game.
The 2 Western games tonight, late night games, Denver and Golden State, Houston and Phoenix, and the Nuggets laying 4.5. And look, they're off no rest after the terrible fourth quarter against Boston, and now they got Golden State, who's rested, and James Wiseman's hurt now. The Warriors, look, Steph Curry can only do so much with that team.
Right.
And you have Houston, Phoenix, and the Suns laying 12 after they just blew out the Wizards. Any quick thoughts on these two?
Well, yeah. Golden State. I would be skittish on them. They failed to cover the spread in 7 of 8 games when they are the underdog. Now you're playing a pretty angry Denver team who only scored, as you mentioned, 8 points. Denver, they have also won 8 of their last 9 road games when playing as the favorite. My conviction for that game lies completely with Denver and them rebounding, no pun intended, but rebounding well after that loss that they suffered at home to Boston.
Let's take a look at Major League Baseball now, Tom.
Sure.
And we have, let's look back at the weekend really quickly, and then we'll take a look at tonight's action. And just kind of scrolling through this quick, the Pirates, they win 2 of 3 against the Cubs. So Trevor Williams made his return to PNC Park after he pitched well against Milwaukee, and then he did not pitch well against his former team on Sunday. So the Pirates now have split the 6 games with the Cubs, I guess, which is kind of impressive on their part. Milwaukee, look at that big start, up 7-0 out of the chute against St. Louis yesterday.
Yep.
So Milwaukee, after losing that opener, now all of a sudden they win 2 against St. Louis. So the Cardinals, who were on that nice little 4-game winning streak, now they've dropped 2 in a row.
Yeah, now Milwaukee returns home, and they're going to be taking on the Cubs. So if you're Milwaukee right now, things I think are looking pretty good for you. This NL Central is a tough division. So I think what Milwaukee has been able to do lately, now they return home for a series that they should win against the Cubs. Things are looking good for the Brew Crew right now.
Out west, Colorado and San Francisco, and German Marquez actually had good numbers against the Giants going into this game. And Marquez was an underdog, had kind of a rough first inning, got 2 quick outs, and then gave up 2 runs. Rockies had a lot of opportunities. They had first and second, no outs, couldn't score. They had bases loaded with Charlie Blackmon up. They couldn't score. Trevor Story was up late with a couple runners on. They couldn't score. So Colorado, you see, when you have no runs and 8 hits, you had chances.
Right.
But Desclafani pitched very well for the Giants, and San Francisco pulls off the sweep there of Colorado. So like we said, the Giants
they're good.
Clearly the third best team in that division. I mean,
Good.
it's not a compliment, but as far as them against the likes of Colorado or Arizona, they're played
better
well so far.
Yeah, and I mean Colorado. I mean, look, they played that game in San Francisco. Now, if that game is played in Coors Field, does Colorado get some more runs on the board? Who knows? But San Francisco is a very difficult hitting park, whereas Colorado is a very hitter-friendly park. And so, I just think that that's kind of interesting when you look at that. Colorado having 8 hits, a couple guys on, they couldn't get the runner across. San Francisco has been flirting as an above-average team now. Now, I know last year was 2020 and when we played half the games, but San Francisco was very impressive last year. And they've seemingly carried it over this year. And I don't know if you saw Johnny Cueto's last outing.
Yeah, he pitched very well.
If he pitches like that, the San Francisco Giants should make the playoffs this year. They're that good. I know it's easy to forget about what they've done in the past, but their core is still there for the most part that was that good. Now, it's in the hitting, not the pitching. But again, if you have Anthony DeSclafani pitching well, who came from Cincinnati, you have Johnny Cueto who's pitching well from Cincinnati. If the arms of San Francisco can do what they're supposed to, I like this team as a sleeper pick to make the postseason.
Yeah, and the Giants, they get a tough game with the Reds coming up. We'll talk about the Reds in 1 second.
The Reds are good.
Yeah, the Dodgers end up shutting out the Nationals. You see that pitching match, Clayton Kershaw against Max Scherzer. And for Scherzer, who was racked by the Braves in his first start, and then he pitches better. Dodgers only get 5 hits, but L.A. ends up sweeping that series from Washington. So the Dodgers, they kind of bounce back from that. Oakland lost in extra innings.
Yeah.
Cincinnati, they won that opener against Arizona. Then the Reds were up 2-0 on Saturday. Arizona went on a big tear.
Yep.
They beat the Reds to slow them down, and then yesterday the Reds get shut out by the Diamondbacks. Luke Weaver was flirting with a perfect game for a while. So Arizona, it's a good job by them to win the final 2 of that series. And for the Reds, look, I mean, these things happen, but they kind of put up a couple clunkers here.
Yeah, but, the Reds' pitching is always going to be the concern this year, particularly the bullpen. And as you look at that box score, innings 5 and 3 were a disaster on the mound for Cincinnati. They are good enough to hit their way to the postseason, though. I don't think the Reds' pitching is going to be the end-all, be-all of them making the postseason, but I do think that they can hit their way in any game to a victory. I know they're not the Yankees, but they have the power and the ballpark very similar to the Yankees. You have a potent offense, a potent lineup in a ballpark where you could probably, you could blindfold hit a home run into right field in Cincinnati and New York. So I find that the dimensions of the home field for Cincinnati and New York are very similar, along with the fact that both lineups, 1 through 9, maybe 1 through 8 with the pitcher in Cincinnati, they can crush. And so I would be willing to take, despite the shutout to Arizona, Cincinnati over the run total more times than not. Don't be surprised if the Reds are at the top of the list at the end of the year in terms of total runs. They are great. They are a great hitting team. If they can get Amir Garrett to pitch well in the bullpen late in games, watch out for the Reds this year.
The late game from Major League Baseball last night, the Phillies avoided a sweep by beating the Braves 7-6. Down 3-0 early. You had the controversial run in the ninth and the tag up, the throw by Marcell Ozuna. I mean, you got to get these calls right.
Yeah,
It's simple as that. You had the Mets Marlins thing earlier in the week with Michael Conforto getting hit in the elbow. You got, 2 NL East games that were affected by questionable calls. And again,
tight divisions.
But look, Philadelphia could have won that game in extra innings, just like the Mets could have. So you can't say that, this game got taken away from the Braves. They still could have won Philadelphia, but, I mean, it's just bad.
Does that go back to the Saints, the non-pass interference call? Then you go to overtime, Drew Brees throws a pick. You still had the chance. You can't really.
If Drew Brees takes the Saints down and they win that game, no one remembers that interference call.
Exactly.
So you got to get those right. But the Phillies end up winning that game against the Braves, and they avoid the sweep. In the American League, looking through this quickly, the Red Sox sweep the Orioles, so Boston got some revenge on the O's for getting swept at Fenway earlier in the season. The Indians beat the Tigers. Now Miguel Cabrera's out. Detroit has just no offense. In Cleveland, they get the sweep of Detroit, so the Indians kind of play a little better now.
Yeah, and Boston, they've won 6 in a row. So congrats to them. Eduardo Rodriguez, I think, is one of the more underrated pitchers in baseball. So kind of watch out for him leading the arm the arm rotation of Boston. I think pitching is going to be obviously the key for Boston because their bats are fine. But it will be on J.D. Martinez, I think, as much as it is Rafael Devers. I think they both need to be in the MVP conversation in order for the Red Sox to make the postseason this year.
The Yankees avoid a sweep against the Rays. They get 4 in the top of the 10th. And again, you can see all these teams busting out in that extra inning because of the runner on second. But a game the Yankees desperately needed. The offense did nothing Saturday. They were up early on Friday. And look, again, long season, but Tampa Bay, who bounced back nicely from getting swept by the Red Sox, they end up with the series win against the Yankees, but New York really needed that win yesterday.
Yeah, now you go on the road from Tampa to, I guess, Tampa, wherever Toronto is playing their games, because now the Yankees are going to be taking on the Blue Jays, who are a very potent offense themselves. It's a big game tonight. Garrett Cole versus Robbie Ray, who's a very, very dynamic pitch. He's got a ton of strength in that arm, Robbie Ray. He's just fastball, strikeout. So it'll be interesting to see how this game goes. But it's a big game for New York coming off of a series loss to Tampa Bay. Now you're going on the road again against a team that's going to be right there probably through most of the season trying to hunt you down in the AL East. This is a big game for New York tonight.
Yeah, and Seattle comes back to beat Minnesota. Look at that. Twins up 6-0. The Mariners get 8 unanswered runs. So Seattle ends up winning 2 of 3 from Minnesota. That's a good job by the Mariners.
Yeah, Seattle, they do well as underdogs, is what I'm starting to notice. There's a lot of trends for the Mariners this year where they win as an underdog. Now, I don't have that trend. I don't have yesterday's trend in front of me. But, I think looking at the Mariners on paper, you say, okay, I'm going to write them off and go the other way. That's not the case. This is a very competitive team with a bunch of bats that you might not have heard of, such as Kyle Lewis. Great player. I'm sure a lot of sports fans who don't follow MLB have never heard of Kyle Lewis before. And then you have Marco Gonzalez in that rotation, who's, I would argue, the ace of the Mariners. So I like what Seattle's doing. They're going to be underdogs more times than not, and they're an underdog you should be looking to back more times than not. Again, it all comes down to choosing the right game, which we'll get into. I'm not sure if Seattle plays today. We'll get into that in a little bit. But in terms of Seattle being an underdog, don't be afraid to wager on the Mariners because they have been pulling through as an underdog this year.
And Seattle gets Baltimore, so you got two kind of even teams.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they'll be underdogs in that one. Yeah.
But the Royals beat the White Sox, and you see Kansas City tied the game up in the 9th, 1 in the 10th, so they were rained out on Saturday, and the Royals end up getting that last win against the White Sox. And that's another game where the White Sox were facing a left-handed starter, Mike Minor. They just couldn't get the win, so they had that nice little run of beating left-handed starters. San Diego won at Texas 2-0. They pull off the sweep of the Rangers. Now, your guy, Mike Foltynewicz, actually pitched really well in that game.
Did he? Good for him.
But he pitched well to get the win. But the Padres, going back to Friday, they had their first ever no-hitter with Joe Musgrove, who came over from the Pittsburgh Pirates, and also he was involved in the Garrett Cole trade for the Astros. When Garrett Cole went from the Pirates to the Astros, Musgrove went from the Astros to the Pirates. So he's a guy that it's like your 3rd or 4th starter in San Diego, but he pulled off the no-hitter against Texas. So the Padres finally got their first no-hitter after all these years.
Yeah, and I mean, this is why I'm not too concerned with the Tatis injury to the Padres. For one, they could just move Machado to shortstop. But secondly, their rotation is phenomenal. It really is. Joe Musgrove's throwing no-hitters. You're set. Between Chris Paddock, him, Daniel LeMay, then the two obvious ones, Snell and Darvish, this might be, at the end of the year, the most dangerous rotation in baseball. I think the Nationals might have something to say about that. Maybe the Mets, depending on health. But if I'm San Diego, Tatis being out, it definitely, it's not ideal, but it's also not, you don't have to hit the panic button. You can get to the playoffs without him. I don't know how long he's going to be out. I doubt he's going to be out for the season, but I think it's encouraging when Joe Musgrove's throwing no-hitters that your pitching rotation should be set for the season.
And Angels, Blue Jays got rained out. Marlins, Mets, this was silly. They played like the first inning, and then they stopped.
All right, guys, that's enough.
So that's just ridiculous. Anyway, you have tonight. All right, so moving over to tonight, San Diego. They're now in Pittsburgh, a huge favorite. Yu Darvish, look at that lane, 220. Trevor Cahill, and Pittsburgh's playing with some confidence. They've won 2 in a row, but at the same time, I don't know how much you could trust Trevor Cahill, even at a plus 200 price against the Padres.
Well, one thing that's interesting with Pittsburgh is that they've won 7 of 8 against the NL West when they're the underdog. So at plus 200, it's definitely worth considering. And I know we've talked about this a few times, Kevin, that Yu Darvish, you don't really know what you're getting out of him until the 5th inning. That's when you can kind of make that determination. Are we getting good Yu or are we getting bad Yu this game? And on the road against a team that has trends, I would be a little skeptical on backing Yu Darvish, especially at minus 220. I think that money line is way too high. I love Yu Darvish, don't get me wrong, but I do not have any conviction in him when the 5th inning comes, and that would be my concern for this one.
Phillies and Mets play for the second time in a week. The Phillies took 2 of 3 from the Mets last week, and the Mets have an excellent chance of winning tonight because Jacob deGrom is not pitching. Whenever Jacob deGrom pitches, he's great.
But they're still favored.
Yeah, they lose 1-0. They lose 2-0. They lost 1-0 to the Marlins on Saturday. I mean, he pitches great, and they can't get any run support. So when he's not pitching, the Mets have a really good chance of winning. And David Peterson goes against Chase Anderson.
Yeah.
And David Peterson actually lost to Aaron Nola in the Phillies last week, so now he's laying 135, which is kind of interesting.
I don't agree with that. I don't. I mean, I get they're home, but New York's, they've lost 3 in a row as the favorite. And now you're playing a good team in Philly who has your number. Yeah. I like Philly in the spot. Minus 135 is a bit high for me for, like you just said, the guy lost already to Philly. Now, granted, he was facing Aaron Nola, and Chase Anderson's no Aaron Nola, but you still have to face that same lineup.
Right.
And so, I think Philly would be the look here. New York lost 3 in a row as the favorite. I don't trust them.
The other NL East matchup tonight, the Marlins and the Braves, and Atlanta off that tough loss to Philadelphia last night, so you wonder now how are they going to go. And the Marlins didn't basically even play yesterday, and they're off a win over the Mets a few days ago.
Right.
And the Marlins so far, I mean, they faced the Rays, they faced the Cardinals, and they faced,
good teams.
Mets,
good
the Mets
teams
are going to be in the mix. So, so the Marlins 2-6 record. There's nothing to shake at that. I mean, they played well.
They've had opportunities in those games,
it's just
too.
The offense. Yeah,
right.
The offense just isn't there. But they have one of their top guys going tonight. So, that's one I'm staying away from. But the Marlins, they've been competitive with the Braves over the years.
Well, let me ask you this: which pitcher do you take in this game, Miami or Atlanta? Who would you bet on between those? Just the pitchers.
I'd take Sandy.
Me too. And I'm also looking at the fact that Miami they've won 4 of 5 road games as the underdog on Monday. So there's conviction there for Miami. I think in terms of the pitching matchup and the trends, they seem to back the Marlins here.
Cubs and Brewers, they meet up again, and Milwaukee lost the first game to the Cubs last week at Wrigley. Then the Brewers won the final 2. So now they're hooking up again. And look, Chicago, off the 2 losses to Pittsburgh as a heavy favorite. Now you get them as a short dog.
Yeah.
Look, the Cubs have this lineup. They have these guys, and they can't produce.
I'm with you. I don't understand.
All of these guys, it's like they've just gone downhill so quickly.
Yeah.
But Milwaukee, their offense has actually performed well after they went through a period where they just were not doing anything. And Christian Yelich, he got a little banged up, so we don't know his status for tonight. But you want to try to take the Cubs. You think there could be value in them, but also they struggled recently.
Yeah. They have won 9 straight Monday night games, though. So there's that. It's amazing what Lorenzo Cain will do to a lineup, isn't it? Just like the impact he's made. I think Milwaukee, quite frankly, is better than advertised. They obviously need pitching, which I think we've said for I don't know how many years now. We've said Milwaukee needs an ace. But I like them. I have a lot of conviction in the Brewers. I love the chemistry they have. This is a team who I feel has had a consistent identity for 3 or 4 years now with Christian Yelich and Lorenzo Cain. Now I know Cain didn't play last year, but 2020 was anything but normal. I like the Brew Crew in this spot. 130, a bit high considering Chicago's won 9 straight Monday night games, but in terms of the better team, I have conviction in Milwaukee over Chicago right now.
Washington goes from LA to St. Louis after they just got swept by the Dodgers, and now you get the Cardinals. You're not facing Clayton Kershaw tonight.
Right.
And John Gant, he's a guy that's been in the rotation for a little bit, but more of a reliever.
Yep.
So you got to kind of question that if you want to back St. Louis. And for Washington, 1-5.
Yeah.
I mean, shoot, they should be 0-6. I mean, they should have lost that game to Atlanta out of the gate. But and again, you look at Washington. who have they faced? The two teams that were in the NLCS last year, Atlanta
Right.
and LA. So really 1-5. They've had the COVID issues. So they get a little bit of a pass right now.
Yeah, but it's not getting easier.
Right.
Road against St. Louis, good team there. I worry about that lineup, what they're going to do to Washington in this game, and Nolan Arenado and Goldschmidt and DeJong. I think they might put up a lot of runs in this one. St. Louis, they've won 10 straight home games on Monday. It does not look good for the Nationals in this game, needless to say. I probably won't be taking this game because minus 140 for a relief pitcher starting, I don't have a ton of conviction in. But in terms of a winner, St. Louis should be fine in this spot, and they should win this game. I know Washington's got a good lineup. They got a good rotation. But to me, there's no excuse for St. Louis losing this game with the pitchers on the mound and the form both teams have entering this.
Reds-Giants, I find this to be a very difficult game to handicap tonight.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cincinnati off the 2-loss to Arizona. Now all of a sudden you're flipped to a short dog.
Right.
San Francisco, Aaron Sanchez, the former Blue Jays righty, who a couple of years ago was outstanding. He was really good for Toronto. And now the Giants, look, you're facing a Rockies team that really is offensively challenged.
Right.
Past Trevor Story and Charlie Blackmon, there's not a lot in that lineup at all, especially on the road. Now you're facing a Cincinnati team that was shut down by Arizona yesterday, and the Reds, we saw what they did early in the season.
Yeah.
All the offense they can provide. They have a lot of bats in that lineup. Wade Miley, you're lucky if you can get 4 innings out of him. But I would like Cincinnati in this game just because of the value. But the Giants have played well. I feel like every time you want to sleep on the Giants, they keep getting wins.
Well, the value is interesting because I do think minus 115 at home against a pitcher that struggles. I think there's value for the Giants in this one at minus 115. The Reds, they've lost 10 of 11 road games when facing the NL West on a Monday. Having to travel to, I guess moving from Arizona to San Francisco, that's not terrible. Right. It is a travel, though. Right. And this is a 9:45 p.m. game. Now, Cincinnati should be fine in the weather, but on the Bay in San Francisco at night, it gets cold there and a little bit windy, even during the summertime. So I don't think the night game in San Francisco is going to bother the Reds as it would maybe some other teams that are used to warmer conditions. But I like San Francisco in this spot. I like Aaron Sanchez. I think he's a good pitcher. I think Brandon Crawford is hitting the ball extremely well. He's a guy who can easily hit 25 home runs in a season. I just like what the Giants are putting out there right now. Cincinnati struggling against Arizona. They have a trend working against them. It's not a small sample size too. 10 of 11 is a lot. So give me the Giants at minus 115 for this one.
In the American League, a game coming up in about an hour or so. Boston, Minnesota. Boston's played well, and
6 in a row.
Yeah, they were 0-3. Now they're 6-3. And they take on the Twins, who are off these back-to-back losses to the Mariners.
Yeah.
And you would think, all right, Minnesota's going to refocus today after blowing a 6-0 lead to Seattle yesterday. But look, do you trust J.A. Happ? And
No.
Martin Perez, the same thing with him. You have 2 up-and-down pitchers in the mound.
Yeah, I don't trust either.
Yeah.
Boston, they've won 6 in a row. Some early game trends for Minnesota. Minnesota, they've lost the first inning in 4 of 6 games on a Monday. Minnesota, they've also trailed after 3 innings in 3 straight games against the AL East. So it does seem that Boston does have a few trends where they might jump out early, and then all of a sudden you see that plus 120 all of a sudden go to minus value. So of the 2, I think you go Boston here, but I personally won't be touching this game, or I will be live betting it because, like you said, Kevin, there's no conviction in Happ or Perez, at least for me. 2 lefties, I don't know. We'll see.
Seattle and Baltimore, and again, 2 very even teams.
Yeah.
And the Mariners open up as a favorite here. It's been flipped to Baltimore now in the favorite role. And Justice Sheffield, who pitched well towards the end of last season, he lost to the White Sox, a really good lineup. And
Really
the
good.
White Sox had some injury issues in that series. But this is a tough one because you say, all right, Justice Sheffield, more of a proven pitcher than Dean Kramer. It's not saying a lot. And Dean Kramer, his last start came against Garrett Cole. So you're a major underdog.
Yeah.
And now you're a short favorite here for a Baltimore team that's lost 3 straight, where Sheffield has pitched all right, and now you're getting him as a short dog against, obviously, a lineup going from the White Sox to the Orioles. There's a major drop-off there. But you say, okay, but am I following the money here? Am I going to take Baltimore because the money now has swung towards the
Right.
Royals. That's the dilemma in this game.
I actually like the run total going over here. If you look at some trends, well, first of all, if you just look at Baltimore, they give up a ton of runs. It's a hitter-friendly park. I mean, teams crush in Camden Yards. Seattle, they've gone over the run total in 4 of 5 games. So in 4 of their last 5 games. I do think it depends on Baltimore if they can get to Sheffield, which I do think they can. Whether the run total will go over, but a 6-3 game, it's over, and I think that's easily accessible. So I would go over the given run total of 8.5.
The Yankees, we just mentioned Garrett Cole, so now he's on the mound. He is laying 190 against Toronto, and the Yankees make the short trip from Tampa, St. Pete's, and Dunedin, which is not very far away.
Right.
And the Blue Jays scored 15 runs against the Angels on Saturday. Last night's game got postponed due to rain against the Angels, so Toronto, in a sense, had like an off day.
Yeah.
But Garrett Cole, again, we know what kind of dominating force he is, and Robbie Ray, like you mentioned before, this guy's going to strike out a lot of batters, but also he's going to throw a ton of pitches, and you're lucky if you can get 5 innings out of him.
I think the run total is a bit high at 9, but one trend that has been constant the past few games, the last 3 games for New York, is that they have trailed after the first 3 innings in 3 straight games. I think minus 190 is incredibly expensive to take. If you like the Yankees, I think there is a chance, a little bit of risk you could take, hoping Toronto gets up early and then live bet the Yankees for plus value and see that they win the game. However, Toronto, they've won 8 straight games on a Monday night. So Toronto does have a few trends. If you like the underdog, if you like Toronto in any way, shape, or form, take the plus 175. But if you are liking the Yankees, I would wait because 3 straight games they've trailed after the first 3 innings. So they had to play catch up a little bit. Might be the same case in this one, but we'll see. I personally will be probably live betting the Yankees if they go down. If the Yankees take a lead early and they run away with it, I'll shake the hand of any bettor who took the minus 190. It's just not my cup of tea.
Texas is at Tampa Bay, and I always like it's not really a trend, Tom. It's kind of like an idea more so that when teams get swept at home, they go on the road and they're heavy dogs. I think they're worth a look. And that's the case with the Texas Rangers here. Dane Dunning, who I'm pretty sure, like 99% sure, pitched at the University of Florida. So now he's not far away. I don't know how much family he's going to have going to see him pitch against the Tampa Bay Rays.
Right.
Dane Dunning came to the Texas Rangers from the Chicago White Sox at Lance Lynn deal. And Dunning now is going to be one of the top options in that Rangers rotation because they're a young team and they don't really have an ace.
Right.
But he pitched well against Toronto his last time out and won as a home dog. Now they're facing Tyler Glasnow, the best pitcher on Tampa Bay. They're facing the ace.
Yeah.
The Rays off this very tough series against the Yankees, losing an extra innings. And Texas here, the offense did perform well on the road against the Royals. I know the Royals are not in the same class as the Rays, but they performed well in that first series of the season before coming home for the 2 series and just got swept by a San Diego team that's been talked about to be in the playoffs. Tampa Bay, obviously defending AL champions. Point is that Texas could be worth a look here. I mean, if you want to even go plus 1.5, but I think that they perform better after having that rough weekend against San Diego. Yeah,
I was going to say, I mean, honestly, they were fine until they were swept by the Padres. 2 of 3 games they didn't score a run in. And quite frankly, I don't expect that to continue against Tampa Bay. Because Tampa Bay, I mean, they haven't really been a knight in shining armor either. They've lost 4 or 5. They've lost 5 of 7, you know? So for minus 210, I'm not taking a team that's lost 5 of their last 7 games, although Tampa Bay should win. You know, Tampa Bay, they've won 11 straight games at home after losing at home the game prior. So they don't lose home back-to-backs often. They should win this game. But for a team that's lost 5 of their last 7 and a team that has lost 3 in a row, 2 of those 3 were shut out. Again, it goes back to the conversation we had earlier. It seems like Texas is due for a big bats game. Whether that comes against Tyler Glasnow, I have no idea. But Tampa Bay is not – they are not playing as good as they can right now. And so I would be hesitant on spending minus 210 on a team that's lost 5 of 7. I don't care who they're playing. That's just too much of a trend going the other way. So I think if you want to take Texas, Kevin, that's fine. Personally, I'm going to avoid this game, though.
Yeah, Tyler Glasnow beat the Marlins in his first start, and then the Rangers. I think it was the Rangers in his second start. No, I'm sorry, not the Rangers. No, I'm thinking of the wrong team. No, it was his second start. I want to look at Tampa Bay really fast. It was against. I'll say exactly what it was. I know we don't have pictures on here, but I know the series. It was against the Red Sox that he went and he lost. Okay, so he lost to the Red Sox. That was his last start. Okay, so now Glasnow was all right.
That was when they performed awful in Fenway Park that series. That actually kickstarted Boston's 6-game winning streak.
Right. So, yeah, I still like Texas. All right. Indians and White Sox and Chicago off that extra innings lost to the Royals and Cleveland. Cleveland's now 5-3. Cleveland has won 5 of 6, and people are kind of forgetting that with this team, that they lost the first 2 to Detroit, and they won the finale. They ended up taking, I believe it was 2 of 3 from the Royals and then sweeping the Tigers. So really, you can argue on Cleveland's side, all right, they're 5-3. They played the Royals and the Tigers so far. They haven't played anybody, and now
powerhouses in the AL Central.
Right. Well, they're playing under 500 team, the White Sox tonight. So no, but Chicago, it's still gonna be a tough game for them against Chicago.
Yeah, Chicago, they've lost 14 of 15 after losing an extra innings the game prior. That's a hell of a trend. So I do think for plus 120, I'll take Cleveland in this one.
Angels and Royals. I actually like Brady Singer here against Alex Cobb. And Brady Singer did not pitch well in his first start against Texas. He got lit up. He was laying 160. Now he's basically like a pick-up against his Angels team. Anthony Rendona's out. Dexter Fowler's done for the year. He tore his ACL. And the Angels, off that 15-1 loss to Toronto on Saturday, they didn't play yesterday. The Royals, look, 4-3 so far, and they beat the White Sox yesterday. I just think that Brady Singer's due for a good start.
The Angels, they've also lost 6 straight road games when playing as the favorite against the AL Central. So there's a trend that does back Kansas City at minus 102 with no Anthony Rendon, no Dexter Fowler. Yeah, I'll buy that. Give me the Royals.
Astros laying 220, and they've lost 2 straight. Casey Mize, he's a big name. He's out of Auburn, and he was the top pick in the draft. Detroit, we know, is challenged offensively, but
they shouldn't be either. Though
Miguel Cabrera's out,
right?
So I don't really know. There's not a lot else in that lineup, but you're facing Zach Greinke tonight. You wonder if you catch the Astros off the back-to-back losses that maybe not say it's using to go backwards now, but look, Detroit just got swept. I mentioned the Texas thing, them getting swept at home. Detroit was swept on the road at Cleveland, but I have to imagine one or both that Detroit and Texas, one of those 2 wins tonight, if not both, because you're getting a good young pitcher against these teams that are coming off losses.
Yeah, and they, whenever you see a young pitcher against anyone, it's new territory, not only for the pitcher but for the hitter. They're trying to figure out, who this pitcher is, what is he like, because there's not a sample size, there's no film studies really to go off of when you have a new pitcher in the league. Of the 2, though, that you mentioned, I would rather take Texas over Detroit for a couple different reasons. Houston's a bit expensive at minus 220, but the Astros, they've won 10 straight home games on a Monday, and I don't see them slowing down at all. So as intriguing as the plus 200 odds are, I think you're throwing money away at that point. Of the 2, I think Texas would be the better pick. I'm kind of with you on that one, Kevin.
Oakland and Arizona is the only interleague game, and Chris Bassett, this is his 3rd start of the season. He started opposite Zach Greinke and Clayton Kershaw's first 2 starts. So now he goes against Madison Bumgarner, who is not the ace he was years ago. He's given up 11 runs so far in 2 starts, and I like fading Arizona here off the 2 wins against Cincinnati because I was like, Arizona's got some momentum, and they're still an underdog here against Oakland, who did win 2 games at Houston. They're now 3-7. They've won 3 of 4, so they're playing a little bit of.
They're getting back, yeah.
But also, I look at Chris Bassett. You just faced 2 elite pitchers, 2 Cy Young winners, and Madison Bumgarner still was a great pitcher. He's just on the decline now.
You still have to respect him on the mound.
Right. I just don't have a lot of faith in the Diamondbacks with him tonight.
No, I'm kind of with you. Arizona, they've won 6 straight home games as the underdog after a win. However, I think you fade this trend for a couple different reasons. One being Oakland is much better than 3-7. They've, like you mentioned, they've won 3 of 4. It's baseball. How many times we see a team 10 games under 500 make the postseason. That start 10 games under 500 in May, and then they make the postseason. So I wouldn't put too much into the 3-7 that Oakland has. They are the better team, without a doubt. You mentioned Madison Bumgarner's given up 11 runs in 2 games. That's concerning as well. The plus 110 at home with Madison on the mound is very intriguing, but I do think it's deceiving for what should happen, which is Oakland should win this road game. I'm going to take Oakland in this game. I don't go against the trends often, Kevin, as you know, but I think this is one you should go against here.
Let's take a look now at our buy picks pages, and we want to remind you in one moment about our contest for tonight. Now, you can buy picks from our handicappers at VegasInsider.com. It's $29.95 for the daily picks, and you can see you can choose from whomever you'd like. Also, the guaranteed picks are $39.95. Pay after it wins. Basically, what that means is if it wins, you pay the $39.95, but you got a winner. If it loses, you pay nothing. Simple as that for our guaranteed selections. You do it in the NBA, in Major League Baseball, in the NHL. So all of that is available for you for tonight. Now, like we mentioned at the beginning of the show, and we'll mention it again now in case you're joining us, that we have our contest that we're starting, that you have 2 requirements, which are free requirements. They're easy. Cost you nothing. All it costs you is typing some things into a keyboard and a click of a mouse. You have to be a subscriber to our YouTube channel, Vegas Insider. All you got to do is just hit the subscribe button. And secondly, you have to have a user ID on VegasInsider.com that costs you nothing.
Yep,
okay?
Just register.
Yeah, you go up to the register button up here, the yellow register button. Click on register if you're not registered already. Free membership, register now. Okay, so costs you nothing. And then you go here, you put in your email address, you see all the information there. You create an ID, you create a password, your email address, your name, your phone number, your birth date. All of that, you see all the requirements on the right, what you need for your password. So you do that, and you're in. You're registered, you're all set to go, and that's on the registration page at VegasInsider.com. This big yellow button that says register. You can't miss it. And what you need to do is, when you go to YouTube and you go to our channel and you go to the live stream, in the chat, you put your user ID, whatever it is, John Smith 123, whatever the case is, and your best play for tonight. If the play wins, then you will be in the drawing for a free week of handicapper selections for a sport for any handicapper you choose.
Yep.
So you give us a winner for tonight, and then we will draw the people who are in that, and whoever we draw, we will get in touch with you, and then you will get a free
week's worth
of one handicapper's picks for a sport. So that's what we have. So go to our Daily Insider live stream, go to the live chat, give us your...
It could be anything.
Yeah.
It could be run totals. It could be
any bet,
first inning market. It can be second half spread in an NBA game. It could be the set spread of a tennis match. Anything that's going on today, any bet you like, let us know what it is.
Yeah.
Seriously.
And then you can be eligible to win the free week.
A week of picks.
Yeah. That's pretty
Can't
good
beat
value.
that.
So
Yeah.
go to the live chat on our on the Daily Insider. And it's not just today, Monday. It's going to be every day.
Every day,
So
yep.
if you don't win today, you have tomorrow. You have the next day. So you have that. Make sure you're registered. Make sure you are a subscriber to our channel at Vegas Insider. You'll be all set. So,
No futures picks because we won't be able to help you out.
We can't wait that long.
Yeah.
It's got to be tonight. We can't wait a few months to see if you want something for down the road. So that's all we have for you today. For Thom Cunningham, I'm Kevin Rogers. If you missed any of the live stream, check it out on our homepage. The Daily Insider is right underneath this baseball free bet story. So click on that in case you missed it from earlier. We have the entire show on there. We appreciate you watching. We appreciate you participating.
Yes.
We'll talk to you again tomorrow for the Daily Insider right here on VegasInsider.com.
Good luck with your picks.